The UK has passed its peak in cases, and on May the 7th will be reaching the minimum date upon which the government will consider lifting the lockdown. Of course, the risk of a second wave is there, so maybe we'll really be in lockdown for months upon months. It is having a very bad economic impact, and I know people make fun of that with my stonks jokes, but it's the actual productive capacity of the world economy which is being harmed. Obviously, that's still not an excuse if far more would die from the virus than from opening things up again, but it is true that we're not completely free from that trade-off, and that it gets more biting as time goes on. I've also seen various theorising that more people are already infected than we think, or that you don't gain immunity to COVID. If this latter point is true, then lockdowns only delay the inevitable and buy the health services time. Either way, I don't have much time for people trying to work it all out themselves. The government has health professionals, virologists and epidemiologists giving them advice, and I really don't think it's part of some larger global plot. If their advice is for the government to maintain lockdowns, then it should be taken absolutely seriously until the advice changes. Now, that being said, I must admit I took the lockdowns too lightly because I was busy laughing at normies suiciding themselves because they couldn't go clubbing. However, after perusing some content, there is a certain factor to all of this that is concerning me. While it's vital to maintain the scientifically advised policy, if you want to be able to do so for a long time, that requires that there is a high level of trust between those enforcing the policy and the British public. And there just isn't. The British police already have a bad reputation, both due to large ongoing scandals such as their handling of various grooming gangs, as well as their creeping acquisition of new powers and their fluid interpretation of the law. Now we are seeing that play out in a quarantine context as the police check people's shoppings for essentials and break into people's homes needlessly. It's very important that people practice social distancing and minimise social contact, but if the police are going to enforce that, they need trust from the public. And trust is earned, it's not just given. The police have the ability to use force, but that requires compliance from the majority in order for the minority of rule breakers to be corralled easily. If you get a breakdown in trust, you can get mass rule breaking, causing chaos, and this is the worst time for that to happen. The police have for a long time done public relation campaigns to give them a softer image. Unfortunately, having a softer image and doing prissy dance numbers does not generate respect, especially when you gain more tyrannical powers at the same time. The police look weak and incompetent, while they simultaneously have great powers. People easier accept being told what to do by a credible old-timey authority than a bunch of high-vis wimps. It's humiliating to have to submit to an institution that appears, feminised and inept. The police need to be a pillar for the community, and they need to have a stoic attitude and aesthetic. I think this is important for psychological monkey reasons. What's the breaking point here? What if we get to that tentative up in the air May the 7th date, and then the lockdown has to still continue, as is already being intimated? People won't trust the next date the government says. Will the police be able to contain that? What if there are mass gatherings? Now, the idea of a coronavirus riot sounds absurd, but we've already seen a minor example in France. In France, they tried to put in place a curfew, but minorities in urban areas felt there was racism and inequality involved in how they were enforcing the curfew, and so you got a little uprising with people throwing stuff at the police. Now, in France, everyone riots at the drop of a hat, so that's one thing. But in the UK, we're seeing the rise of conspiracy theories associating the coronavirus with the 5G network. And so then you get a bunch of people going out and trying to topple a 5G mast. These are silly people, and I wish they'd do as they were told and stay put. But the job of the police is to maintain the credibility among the populace they need to make sure stay put. Authority is a diminishable resource, as it depends not just on physical force, but also on psychological compliance. If you use authority frivolously to do unnecessary things like checking people's shopping and breaking into people's houses, you have less authority to use to do the necessary work of preventing social gatherings. You can always club people, but if you club too often and too chaotically, you're going to end up with far more unruly people to club, and at a certain point you're all clubbed out. Have I used the word club too much yet? Yes, some complete bloody fucking tinfoil hat morons need their brains bashed into paste. But as things go on, it's not going to just be those people. if we need the police to be really, really tough, and we do, we also need the police to be really, really, really fair. And a police force that makes up its own law is not one I'd call fair. Step it up, coppers. That's all I've got to say. Step it up.